refusing to carry the flame. We're back to carrying the flame once again. All right, let's get back to Mearsheimer versus Chris Hedges now.
So I scratch my head and say, well, who is that? Are they going to send in the IDF? No, I mean, they're bogged down in southern Lebanon, and the Israelis are too smart to invade Iran. That's not going to happen. So who's going to do it? And it looks like, if anybody, it's going to be the Kurds coming out of Iraq who invade Iran. But the Kurds are not going to do that unless they're crazy. And if they do invade, it's not going to have any meaningful consequence. The Kurds are our ground force option? This is not serious. 8,000 troops in the region are a ground force option? I don't think so. Furthermore, if President Trump were foolish enough to try and seize an island or to land somewhere on the coastline of Iran, many American soldiers would die. This would be a highly dangerous operation. The Iranians would go to great lengths to retaliate and drive those American forces off the beaches. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what does the cost-benefit analysis look like for President Trump? There'd be zero benefit, right? What is he going to gain by invading an island or, establishing a beachhead on the Iranian coast? What are the gains from that? I don't see any. And the cost is that many Americans will die in what almost everybody will see as a futile military operation. And he'll pay an even greater political price.
Yeah. Considering that there is no way to reassert military dominance over Iran as it stands currently, and considering the reality that every day that goes on, every day that continues, every day that this war wages on is worse for America overall, worse for the rest of the globe overall. There's nothing that they can do about it. There's nothing. They're going to keep risking bigger and more military assets. They're going to keep risking bigger actions. They're going to keep risking more military assets and potentially put more troops' lives at risk as well.
For that, so why would he do that? So I don't see any ground force option. Chris, just to elevate for a second here, we started with a strategic bombing.
The only way would be ground invasion, and that's not happening. Dude, there's no guarantee that the ground invasion would actually hold either. Because in order to actually do a successful ground invasion, you can't just invade militarily the coastline of Iran or the islands of Iran. Right? You have to invade the rest of Iran too at some point. And in order to do that, we don't have the sufficient number of troops amassed or even drafted to be able to militarily dominate and engage in a permanent military occupation over the entire Iranian nation state. It's just not going to happen. And as far as the current predicament, there's no supply line to Keshem Island. There's no supply line to Karg Island. Even if they were to defeat the conventional forces on the ground, they would not be able to establish a supply chain with any of the military bases in the region, because Iran has been destroying those military bases with ease. So it's all fucked.
Campaign that lasted 40 days. It failed. We were running out of munitions, and despite all the talk about all the damage we were doing to Iran's missile and drone capability, that proved not to be true. So we quit after 40 days. Then we went to the blockade. That lasted just a little over 2 months. And then we quit when we signed the memorandum of understanding because the blockade didn't work. Then Trump welched on the deal on the June 17th memorandum of understanding, and we started engaging in this tit-for-tat war, which we're now involved in. And that's not working, as we've just talked about. That's not working. The one thing we haven't done, by the way, we have actually reinstituted our blockade. We're back to the maritime blockade as well, which didn't work last time. But on July 14th, President Trump reinstituted the naval blockade. So we have that at play now with the tit for tat. But it looks like the tit for tat's not working out very well as we talked. So people are now talking about using land power. We've used air power, we've used naval power. That didn't work. Let's use land power. This is not a serious option. If it was a serious...
As much as I dislike Kirky, man, he didn't want the Iran war. No, I know. I know. But it doesn't matter. He didn't like fucking Jeffrey Epstein either. But he shut the fuck up real quick when Donald Trump made the boss call. If you think Charlie Kirk wouldn't be spending every damn day, if he was still alive, if you think he wouldn't be defending, being one of the... If you think he wouldn't be spending every damn day defending the Iran war, you're delusional. Okay? Charlie Kirk's primary goal was to be the regime propagandist on the independent media side. Okay?
Option. We would have tried it a long time ago. We didn't try it a long time ago because it doesn't stand any chance of working. The point is, Chris, we have no military option here. This is why Trump signed the June 17th MOU, because we had no option. The Iranians were winning the war. And then the question you have to ask yourself is, have the dynamics changed since then? Is there evidence that the United States has turned the tide and that we now have found a theory of victory? The answer is clearly no, unless you and I are missing something and they have some secret strategy in mind that they haven't told us about. And I don't think that's the case.
Isn't there always a temptation to go back to LBJ and the Vietnam War when it was clear, and it was clear fairly early on in the Vietnam War, that the United States was in serious trouble? Then you get the heavy bombing campaign of North Vietnam. This fantasy that the escalation of force is going to solve your problem has been characteristic of these imperial adventures in Iraq, Afghanistan, and as I said earlier, in Vietnam, although it's not tethered to reality.
Well, a couple of points on Vietnam. First of all, there's no question that the Johnson administration, starting in March of 65 is when the bombing campaign began, big time. This is Rolling Thunder. And then shortly thereafter, we put combat troops. This is on March 8th, 65. We put combat troops for the first time into Vietnam. And we escalated and escalated up until March 31st of 1968. You remember very well that that's when LBJ, who was the president, said that he was not going to run for another term. He was clearly a defeated man.
Guys, I can't watch the World Cup. Are you kidding me? I can't watch the World Cup ceremony. I don't want to get fucking chatters. We cannot watch anything FIFA related. Okay? You understand that, right? You understand that, right? Like, there's nothing we can watch FIFA related. Yes, I saw that I'm in this Israel ad. Yes, Israel put me in a fucking AI ad that played during the World Cup. I know, I'm going to get to it. There's so much real news to cover that I can't. It's getting to a degree. It's getting to a point where like real politics, like John Fetterman threatening to leave the Democratic Party because of me, is now drama in comparison to like what I need to cover, which is real shit taking place. You know, America's possible military invasion of Iran. Like, and the same goes for like back in the day, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if there was an AI ad that a foreign adversary or a foreign country made of me, I would cover that for like an hour. There'd be a huge story for me. And it has happened already. Russia did it first. Literally, Russia did this already. Russia called me a homosexual Twitch streamer who likes posing in front of nice cars, as opposed to the brave Russian military operative who dies in the fucking front lines in the grayest village of all time. Yeah, Russia did that to me years ago. And now Israel is doing it as well. So, it's not... I don't know. I just don't have the fucking bandwidth anymore, man. Yeah, they said I drink banana smoothies as a homosexual Twitch streamer who likes wearing a lot of jewelry and posing in front of nice cars.
We had failed. Now, it's very important to understand that all along the way, from March 65 up until 68, the key decision makers, including Johnson himself, did not have a lot of faith in the military option that we were pursuing. They were desperate, but they were well aware that there were tremendous limits to what we could do against the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong with military force. They were not wildly optimistic. Nevertheless, they escalated. And I think that you see a similar situation here. I think after the initial bombing campaign failed, after about 2 weeks, we understood that we were in a very difficult position. I believe that we will eventually discover that the key policymakers inside the administration understood pretty early in this war that we did not have a good military option. Nevertheless, we've escalated. And this is exactly what happened in Vietnam. There's no question that the leaders understood that we did not have a good military option, but they escalated. And as you remember, we ended up with about 530,000 combat troops in Vietnam. Just think about that. 530,000 combat troops in Vietnam by March of '68, when Johnson decided that the war was a lost cause. And he stopped the bombing campaign. Of course, Nixon and Kissinger then came in, and they thought that maybe they could find a way to win the war. Nixon said that he had this secret plan to get out of the war, but not really. What he really wanted to do was see if he could greatly reduce the American military commitment and we could still win the war. But of course, that didn't happen. And we were forced to quit, just like that was in '72, of course, we quit. And what happened with Johnson is he quit in '68. And if you look at Trump and what happened, he quit once on June 17th. And I think what's going to happen here is he's going to be forced to quit again. Not altogether unlike what happened in Vietnam. Again, Johnson wanted to quit March '68, and Nixon was eventually forced to quit at the end of '72. We just had no military strategy for winning against Vietnam. We had no military strategy for winning in Afghanistan. We had no military strategy for winning in Iraq.
I mean, with the exception of World War II, where it became an existential threat, especially for the USSR and all of the other countries that were being dominated militarily by the Nazis, there's a reason why America has never really seen a victory since then. Because until it becomes an existential war, there's no reason for like America's ambitions are never going to be fully realized. And even World War II, if you look at it from that reductive approach, was existential for other countries, not necessarily the United States of America, even though the United States of America obviously was a pivotal ally. I'm not taking away from that. But I think simply put, people fight till their last dying breath if they have something to lose. I mean, the first Gulf War was successful. I don't even bring that up because that's not real. You know, it's like saying Grenada, the Grenada invasion, you know? Like, America has had a lot of successful operations, especially covert ones. Like, the CIA has really carried American imperialism for the last almost 100 years. I'm talking like a real war. You know what I mean? Not that doesn't... Like that we're attacking our own asset at that point. It just seems silly to bring that up. It's like saying Venezuela was a war that we won, you know? This, on the other hand, like what's going on against Iran, Iran is a middle power, right? Iran is a middle power, but it's a regional power nonetheless. What happens to be a very important region for the rest of the world. Okay? Iran controls a critical route that 20% of the world's oil and gas goes through. So, even as a middle power, Iran is capable of making America suffer, making the rest of the world suffer, and therefore making America suffer. And at some point, we have to realize that America doesn't fight wars to win them. America fights wars to continue those wars. America fights wars for key sectors in its economy. But in this circumstance, America has to win. And because it's incapable of winning, you arrive at this endless military quagmire. All of the other failed wars that were long-lasting, 20-year occupations, all of those initiatives, they did not have a compounding effect on the rest of the world. They did not end up damaging the world's energy infrastructure. They did not end up creating economic issues for the rest of the world, right? "20 years in Vietnam, sure, it has regional effects, but it doesn't impact Europe. The global war on terror has some consequence for Europe, refugee crisis, but ultimately, most of the oil fields remain intact. They exchange ownership. They're sold off to Western oil and gas companies, and it's actually decent for that. It's actually good for the American oil and gas industry. They don't even stop selling oil in Iraq to China. They continue selling oil to China. It's just now the people that are profiting are not the Iraqi people or the Iraqi government necessarily, but instead Western companies. This is different. I've been saying that from the first day onward. This is different because the rest of the world is suffering now, is suffering directly due to American intervention. And there's only so much suffering that America can get other people on board with until they start to push back.
We have no military strategy for winning here. But your point is that once you get into these things, very hard to get out, no question. And you look for ways to escalate. And it's kind of like a wing and a prayer. You know, maybe something will happen that we don't foresee. And if we just double down, maybe, you know, we'll be lucky. And I think there's just a lot of that going on. I think that's what President Trump was thinking after June 17th. He figured that memorandum of understanding I signed, it's a surrender document. I really don't like it. I'm sure the Israelis and the Israel lobby and neoconservatives and the hawks in the United States were telling him he made a mistake signing that June 17th MOU. And he probably said, let's try something else. Maybe if I go back to, you know, putting pressure on the Iranians, I can get them to cut a deal. And here we are. But again, there is no deal to be had, just as there was no deal to be had in Vietnam. If you took 5 of the smartest strategists in the United States and you could ramp back in a time machine to March of 1965, and you told those 5 strategists, it's your responsibility to come up with a brilliant strategy to win the Vietnam War, the end result would be the same. And if they were really brilliant strategists, they would have told LBJ not to go in. And if he had nevertheless gone in, they would have told him to immediately get out, because there was no way to win the Vietnam War. We had no theory of victory. And again, I think that most of the policymakers at the time understood that.
Well, who's advising Trump? That's the question. You know, he doesn't have a McNamara. Whatever you think of McNamara, he was.
Who's advising Trump? Benjamin Netanyahu. That's clear to me. I don't know if that's far-fetched to say, but Benjamin Netanyahu, Foundation for Defending Democracy, and numerous other Israel firsters that are in his immediate vicinity. That's who's advising him. It used to be Lindsey Graham, and he's dead now, but his spirit still remains in the room.
Competent, although, of course, led us into disaster in Vietnam. But that's the question. He's surrounded by sycophants and people like Stephen Miller. I don't know if Miller is involved in this, but of course he has no military training. You know, and that's that. And Trump seems to be able just to decide unilaterally. I mean, Congress did pass a resolution with Republican support saying any more strikes on Iran had to be cleared through Congress that, of course, Trump has just blithely ignored.
Well, it's very hard to say, you know, who exactly is whispering in his ear. And it's also hard to say whether he listens to anybody. It seems from the outside that the key force for restraint, the person, who was sort of acting like McNamara, and just to be clear, McNamara figured out quite quickly that we had no winning strategy in Vietnam. He did not act this way when he spoke publicly. He was full of confidence when he talked publicly about the war. But it's quite clear now that behind closed doors, he understood that we just did not have a winning strategy. And I think if there's anybody in the administration who fits that bill, it's J.D. Vance.
That's fucking wrong. No. Okay. We found it. Area of disagreement with the GOAT. Hate to see it happen like this, but I vehemently disagree with my GOAT. Mearsheimer is wrong. J.D. Vance is not a reliable advisor to Donald Trump. Okay? J.D. Vance is a non-entity in the room. J.D. Vance is a careerist. J.D. Vance is simply a placeholder so that Donald Trump can continue taking advantage of the techno-feudalist fascist billionaires that see J.D. Vance as their guy in the room, specifically Peter Thiel. Trump does not like J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is a surrogate for Peter Thiel. Trump understands that. And J.D. Vance has no capabilities of influence in the room, especially considering Dude, what the fuck's going on with Twitter? Twitter's been going crazy.
Quite clear that Vance was hardly enthusiastic about this war to begin with. He had real doubts, and it appears that he advised against it. And he has been the point.
No. I don't agree with this. J.D. Vance is an empty suit. J.D. Vance does not have a real ideological position on this war. This is complete hokum. Sorry. That is not real. J.D. Vance is not an anti-interventionist. J.D. Vance is not anti-war with Iran. J.D. Vance is simply positioning himself as that because he has further ambitions. He has ambitions for higher office. He can read the room a little bit, but of course, he is incapable. He doesn't have a consistent stance on this. He's not. You can see it. Yeah, Chris Hedges, his response is my response. Okay, that's how I feel about this take. I mean, you can hear it with J.D. Vance's own words, with what he tries to leak to the media, presenting himself as like being in opposition to the Iran war. But clearly, when he's in the room, he's like, "Oh, we got to go big or go home." All of this stuff is bullshit. He's a flip flopper, and he's not being serious. He's not sincere. I don't believe J.D. Vance actually has a different opinion. Most people also hate him for this reason, because he's not consistent.
Man, for dealing with the Iranians. I mean, he is the person who met with the Iranians with regard to getting the 17 June MOU in place. So it looks like Vance is the person who is telling Trump that it makes sense to cut a deal here. And as we all know,
he refused to leave again? No. That's crazy. It's especially crazy to do this to Spain, a country that he fucking hates, by the way. God, he's such a fucking loser. At least he's on the edge, so it'll be easier to fucking edit him out. You know what I mean? He's got to ruin everything, man. He's got to ruin everything. Everything he touches dies.
Vance has basically said publicly that he thinks that the Israelis and their supporters in the United States have been going to great lengths to sabotage the 17 June MOU and any future negotiations that might put an end to this conflict. So Vance looks like one person who's pushing in the right direction. I don't know what to make of Witkoff and Kushner. I wouldn't be surprised if Witkoff was telling him pretty much the same thing that Vance is. I would guess that Rubio is saying exactly the opposite. You want to remember, Chris, that what Rubio and Vance say on this issue has significant implications for their chances of being the Republican presidential candidate in 2028. I'm sure Vance understands that by being appointed the point man in dealing with the Iranians and working to negotiate a deal with the Iranians, Vance is not going to endear himself to the Israel lobby and to the hawks in the United States, and they will go to great lengths to make sure that Rubio, not Vance, is the Republican candidate in 2028. Viewers should remember that when President Trump was thinking about appointing a vice president for his 2024 run, the two choices were Rubio and Vance barely won because there was a huge amount of pressure from people like Rupert Murdoch to make Rubio the vice presidential candidate, but Vance won out in the end. And these two individuals will surely be in a head-to-head competition for the 2028 nomination of the Republican Party.
Dude, JD Vance doesn't have a position. JD Vance does not have a real position. JD Vance is a surrogate for Peter Thiel. And I don't think Peter Thiel has a real commitment to ending this war anyway. The only reason why JD Vance is positioning himself as a advocate for isolationism is because he's positioning himself for what comes after. Okay? It's just empty. It's just empty posturing. That's all this is. So not only does he not have a real opinion, he is incapable of having a real opinion. That's not his goal. His goal is to be an empty vessel for whatever Peter Thiel wants. But also on top of that, like even if Peter Thiel was like, oh, I want you to be anti-war, I don't think he would have a lot of motion in that room. I just don't think that Donald Trump gives a fuck one way or another what JD Vance thinks. Donald Trump is aware that JD Vance is a Peter Thiel blood boy. He's in the room because Donald Trump wants to maintain favorable posture with the likes of Peter Thiel and the techno-feudalists for one reason or another. I don't know if that's the smart calculation for him or whatever the fuck it is, but clearly that's his goal, right?
For the presidency. And I think how the two of them act on this whole subject of dealing with Iran and working out a memorandum of understanding really matters for that purpose. I don't think it's any surprise that you don't see Marco Rubio, deeply involved in dealing with the Iranians. He surely understands who's buttering his bread, and he's trying to stay as far away as he can from getting involved in those negotiations. And of course, from his point of view, it's advantageous that it's Vance who is involved. But I do think Vance understands that we cannot win this war, that we have to cut a deal. And that from his point of view, but I think more importantly, from Trump's point of view, I think Vance believes that from Trump's point of view, the best thing that could happen here is just to cut a deal and put an end to this, accept the fact that we've lost and walk away.
I mean, how much time do we have left before the global economy craters? It's already pretty stressed out, the shortages of cooking oil.
Because Rubio's running Venezuela. I already explained this to you. Marco Rubio's goal is to be the viceroy of all Latin American operations. It's a much cushier job. It's a much easier job. JD Vance is on janitorial duty over in the fucking Iran fiasco. That tells you how Donald Trump treats both of these individuals. That tells you what Donald Trump thinks of either of these guys. Donald Trump doesn't fuck with JD Vance. If he did, he wouldn't be holding him responsible for, his failures in Iran. He sent his ass out there to make him hold that L, the MOU, and the fact that the memorandum of understanding would not work out. He knew full well that he had no intentions of creating a permanent and resilient peace. He just sent JD out there. I mean, probably JD also understands that wasn't going to happen regardless, but it looks good for him. He can position himself as like someone who was trying to keep the peace. And unfortunately failed to do so because Iran was just not interested in negotiations or whatever, you know?
In India, fertilizer, helium for microchips. I had read before the memorandum of understanding that some economists were saying by July that if there wasn't an opening of the strait, we could head for a global depression. And as I mentioned in the introduction, the strategic reserves have been heavily depleted, and not just in the United States, countries like Japan as well. How much more time do we have?
Let me tell you how I read the oil situation. I think what's happened is that with a set of workarounds, we have been pretty successful at minimizing the damage that has been done so far. And there are three major workarounds that I see. First, as I told you before, of the 20 million barrels that used to come out of the Gulf, 7 million are actually still coming out. So when people say that the flow of oil out of the Gulf has been completely cut off, those 20 million barrels have been completely cut off, that's not true. 7 million are coming out through Yanbu and Fujairah. That's Yanbu in Saudi Arabia and Fujairah in the UAE. And furthermore, as you know, the canal has been, the strait has been opened up at different points. And some ships have come out when that strait was opened up, including Iranian ships. So the 20 million barrels have not completely disappeared. That's one point you want to keep in mind. The second point is, and this is quite remarkable, the Chinese have greatly reduced their demand for oil by about 5 million barrels a day. It's amazing how they've done that, and how they've done it, we're not sure.
Yes, we are. We are sure. It's because they no longer have the same reliance for oil and gas, and they just maintain the strategic petroleum reserves, partially because they want to, at the end of the day, keep the market stable, and they're using it right now. It gives them tremendous leverage as a major buyer, especially in moments like this. But also, the only reason why they're capable of doing this is because of green energy. They've electrified their grid. They use renewable energy in their infrastructure. The reason why this is another area of disagreement with my goat, where he is far too much of a China hawk. He's definitely gotten a lot better in like the last decade or so, but I think Mearsheimer has always been Mr. Offensive Realism, and he's always had a very negative approach to China. So I think that's clouding his perspective a little bit.
But the fact is that
yeah, they have massive oil reserves. They've been using more coal because they always had that infrastructure. But a big part of the reason why they don't have to offset that and can just like kick coal in is because most of their energy grid, they have a big chunk of their energy grid also has renewable energy.
the Chinese demand for oil has gone down 5 million barrels. So when we talk about those 20 million barrels coming out, there's 5 million, right? 5 million that are not needed because the Chinese have reduced their demand, and there's 7 million that are coming out from the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And then getting back to what you were mentioning, there's all that oil that's been released from the strategic reserve. And that adds up to another maybe 3 million barrels a day, as best I can tell. So when you add all these things together, you can see that we have been able to weather the crisis in the Gulf reasonably well up to now. Now, what scares people is that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is running down, and we're running out of oil that's available in that strategic reserve to float into world oil markets. Furthermore, there is the danger, as I was talking about before, that Fujairah and Yanbu will be completely shut down, and then there'll be no oil or hardly any oil coming out of the Gulf. And then there's the Chinese demand for oil, which is the wild card. What if the Chinese all of a sudden decide that they need more oil? And the demand for oil from China begins to go back where it was on February 27th. If those three things happen, then you're in deep trouble. But it's hard at this point to say exactly how this plays itself out. I mean, for example, if President Trump continues the tit for tat campaign this coming week, and he doesn't go after Iranian infrastructure in the process, he doesn't go after Iranian bridges and power capabilities or power stations, then maybe the Iranians will not shut down the Red Sea, and maybe oil will start to come out of Fujairah, or will continue to come out of Fujairah. I'm not sure whether Fujairah is completely shut down at this point. And that really matters for the overall question of oil supply. And then what the Chinese do is just very hard to say. So all this is to say we're in a sense flying blind here.
I mean, really, it sounds like there are two roads that we can take. One, if the United States does continue to attack infrastructure, we are headed for a humanitarian disaster in the Gulf. If it doesn't, then it leaves open the possibility of some kind of a negotiated settlement that is even more advantageous to Iran than the Memorandum of Understanding. Are those the two kind of scenarios that face us?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I don't, again.
I think this is major leverage for China. It's a great opportunity for them to engage in soft power. They also kind of have to do it once again because they need stability for their development. They have their own domestic economic problems if they can't consistently produce commodities for other countries, also in the Asian market as well. And if their economies tank, then the Chinese economy is going to feel it too. And that's part of the reason why they once again bailed the United States of America out. They don't make risky plays. That's just not how they operate. And that's it. Yeah. They want the Strait of Hormuz to open, obviously. They need the same precursory chemicals that are coming out of the Gulf, right? Even if they don't have the same level of reliance on like oil and gas, maybe they can swap out their energy grid for coal, which they're, going back to, sure. And they've also reduced their reliance on fossil fuels overall with their renewable energy grid. This is a opportunity to maintain stability, generate some goodwill. And also it gives them tremendous leverage because once they fucking increase their purchases again, they could just explode the markets. Prices would skyrocket instantly. It would give America less rope to hold on to.
I don't see a land invasion as feasible or as turning the tide. I don't think we have any meaningful theory of victory at this point in time. And I think what's happening here is that we have this tit-for-tat strategy or tit-for-tat campaign taking place between the United States and Iran. And the question is, how does it play itself out? And I think we'll know a lot a week from now.
Yeah. Here's some additional analysis that I want to get into. One comes from Amos Hochstein. This is the Amos Hochstein that worked in the Biden administration. He was the senior advisor to the White House under Joe Brandon. He is also responsible for a lot. I mean, he is one of the major figures that was responsible. He's an IDF veteran. One of the figures responsible for Biden's continuation of Israel's genocide. Here's what he had to say. As Trump weighs escalation or deal, he's confronting a harsh reality. The Russia and Iran fronts are coalescing, and the tools to manage the next energy shock are disappearing week by week. One, when the Hormuz MOU was announced, transit relief flowed to crude, not diesel, gasoline, or jet fuel. That gap is now the market's biggest vulnerability. Two, Ukraine's systematic strikes on Russian refineries forced Moscow into a full ban on diesel exports, producers and traders alike. Russia is 11% of the global diesel supply. I mentioned this as well. Refining margins here and globally are at record highs. Crack spreads are telling you refined products, not crude, are the real choke point right now. EIA DOE itself is now flagging that Cushing, Oklahoma, the WTI crude delivery point, is at tank bottoms. Another thing that I explained to you guys is that once we reach a certain level, Once we reach a certain level, the strategic petroleum reserves heading below 300 million barrels. Once they reach 150, it's over. Then you start experiencing compounding disaster. Okay, that's the 300 is the red zone. 150 is the limit. Once you reach 150 million barrels on the strategic petroleum reserves, it's over. It means that the salt caverns could potentially collapse due to not enough pressure. The shock absorber for the next disruption, and it's almost gone, he says. Storage bottomed near 90 million barrels in June, lowest since 2014, and has barely rebuilt since. China bought the world time, cutting imports by 4.4 to 5 million barrels per day at the peak of the shock, and is now re-entering the market. Lifting fuel export curbs, restocking. That cushion may not be there next time. If Hormuz escalates again, the tools that existed in March, the SPR headroom, Cushing storage, Chinese demand destruction, are shrinking every week. It's not just the energy. The 10-year war is near a 2-month high at nearly 4.6%, and 30-year has traded above 5% since July 7th. The bond market pricing in exactly the inflation risk this points to. At the pump, gasoline will likely rise above $4 again in days. Diesel has already recrossed $5, both at or above levels last seen in 2022. Time to cut losses and make a deal. Markets are holding, but the tools to manage the next crises are running out, and China may not bail us out again. The fact that it's almost Hochstein that's saying this when he is obviously an ideologically, Zionist, aligned with Israel guy. The fact that this was Biden's like number one Israel dick rider in the office, turning around and actually, doing this kind of analysis, demanding that the war end, is pretty important, I think. Yeah, he's not only a China hawk, but he's obviously super pro-Israel. He felt pretty sweet about pummeling Gaza and continuing the genocide when there were no market impacts like this. I wonder if Israel will join back again. We'll see. We'll see what happens, because they are in some ways more belligerent, but they're also much more sensitive to retaliation than the Americans are. Americans die all the time. We throw bodies to the problem with regular frequency. 12,000 U.S. service members died in the global war on terror so that our petro-capitalist pedophiles could turn tremendous profits year over year. Obviously, the European continent was destabilized in the process. We don't give a fuck about what we do to the rest of the world. We don't give a fuck about killing our people, especially if someone's making money. Now, the problem now is some people are making money, but a lot of people are losing money. There's too much volatility. A little bit of volatility is an opportunity to generate greater returns on risky investments, but too much volatility, too much instability means you can no longer make adequate market predictions. Now the super wealthy people, some people might make some money in the process, but most super wealthy people are not going to make money. That creates a unique pressure on Donald Trump. Israel, on the other hand, is far more belligerent than the United States of America in many respects, because it constantly fucking wages war with its enemies, with its neighbors. However, Israel is also far more sensitive to troop loss than the United States of America is. That's part of the reason why I don't know if they're going to join in on the fun and start bombing Iran, especially because now Iran has created a huge opening where Israel is left unguarded, left unprotected, unlike ever before. They've depleted the munitions, the anti-air defense systems in the last 130 days. And then on top of that, they shut off a lot of America's eyes and ears in the region by blowing up radar installations. And last but not least, this past week, for the last 8 days, Iran has been pummeling Jordan and destroying the Jordanian anti-air defense systems, many of which were sent to Jordan. The Americans were sent to Jordan, as Mearsheimer also explained, because all of the other bases in the region were unguarded. Jordan had more anti-air defense systems because of its proximity to Israel, because of its position as basically a a stopgap measure before missiles fall on Israel. They had better air defense systems. Now Iran is destroying the Jordanian air defense system, so Israel is uniquely vulnerable. So we shall see. They're crazy, but I don't know if they're that crazy. Hassan, your fit today is ass, not going to lie. I'm sorry. Are you sad that Argentina lost? España, baby. Here's a Haaretz expose. How Netanyahu concealed the disagreements within Israel's military leadership from President Trump. This week, we published an investigation, the deepest dive yet, into Israel's plan to topple the Iranian regime and install Ahmadinejad as its new leader. In February 11th, 2026, Netanyahu arrived at a decisive meeting at the White House where he presented President Trump with a full plan of regime change in Iran. Netanyahu was confident the plan would succeed, and that's what he told Trump. In Washington, it was met with deep skepticism. But Netanyahu concealed from Trump and his senior officials that Israel had serious doubts of his own. The top ranks, I think this is face-saving. I don't know. I think Israeli military intelligence is dog shit in general. I think they constantly overestimate their capabilities, and it's literally being held together. It's being held together by a hope and a dream. That's what I think. Like, there are instances where they are capable of pulling off fairly sophisticated interceptions at the logistical level, at the supply chain level, like the fucking pager attack, which is an act of terror, by the way. It's a complete war crime and unacceptable, but a fairly sophisticated terror attack. Having said that, their intelligence inside of Iran, I think, used to be far better. Their intelligence inside of Iran is not as good as they claim it is. And I don't know if Israel knew that this would not work out and Benjamin Netanyahu hid it, or if they truly believe their own nonsense. Not that it matters. What matters is Donald Trump believed it, which produces the country's national intelligence assessment. Top ranks in the military intelligence had serious doubts, concluded that the plan Netanyahu was pitching to the Americans stood little chance of success. The head of military intelligence put that assessment in writing. Israel's former national security advisor dismissed the plans as science fiction and stopped attending the preparatory meetings altogether. None of this reached Trump. Instead, Netanyahu presented the White House with a picture of Israeli consensus and high chances of success, the opposite of what Israel's own experts had concluded. I think we're at the tail end of Benjamin Netanyahu's career. Now, he's impossible to take out in some ways. He is Teflon. But I do think his time in power is coming to a close, and they're going to use him as a sacrificial lamb and then try to restore Israel's position around the globe as like a normal country, even though it's a pariah state. Now, do I believe that it will work? Who knows? But I do think that, the Israeli military, the Israeli intelligence, Israeli public, by and large, despise him. He doesn't have many advocates that remain at this point. His last shot was to try to goad Trump into going and blowing up Iran, and that's blowing up in his face right now. So at this stage, if he continues with this nonsense, maybe Trump will do Zoran a major fucking. Trump might even give Zoran a major W and allow Zoran to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu somehow. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then we can all be like, oh, America, the real savior. See, we're punishing the worst guy, the only guy that's been causing chaos around the world, not us. You know? Obviously, it's most likely not gonna happen. I'm wish casting here, but I wouldn't be that shocked if that did take place. Yeah, AIPAC is allowing their dogs to criticize him. The deep state has turned on him. He's lost his mandate. Yeah. Anyway, now let's get to another Israeli initiative. So the World Cup is happening, and of course, Israel had to Had to run some ads there. Let's take a look at one of the commercials that they ran, and maybe you'll notice some people in this commercial.
We just witnessed.
Made a
Who's that guy with the co-pink ladies? I wonder who this AI fellow is. I wonder who this guy's supposed to be. Obviously, Israel hasn't gotten the patch notes. They don't know that I'm a suit guy now. They still think I wear jewelry around my neck and also t-shirts.
Is this really what you want your Republican Party to look like? It's time to act before normal people are shut out of the
Yeah. Which, of course, is not the first time that I've been, made fun of by a foreign country. Who has the Russian one? Someone's got to have the OG video. Who here remembers when the Russian government called me a homosexual Twitch streamer? Let's start with the first order of business, okay?
Из иллюзий и банановых смузи сделаны наши мужчины. Из яркого грима и стримов
back when I used to paint my nails and wear a lot of jewelry and pose in front of cars. That's crazy. Okay? How the did I make the goddamn Russian government my op? That's insane. Okay? Who is over there like former Hasanabi head? They got my worst era too. They got my worst era. FSB's hate watching out here, bro. What made me looking like Bam Margera, Temu Hassan? That's insane. You're not beating the Russian op allegations. What are you talking about? This is literally directly saying I'm gay. Okay? What they're saying, like, our men aren't gay and fruity and one time for an oh. I don't get it. How are they saying you're gay? They're saying I put on... Dude, what do you mean? They're saying I'm fucking fruity. Like, look at what it's juxtaposed with.
сделаны наши
Our men are made
мужчины. Из яркого
bright makeup and streams.
грима и стримов
Like they're saying like, oh, the ones who are, our men are made of the real stuff. They don't drink banana smoothies. They don't get tattoos. They don't have pierced ears. They go and they fucking die in the grayest village in Ukraine. That's what they're fucking saying. Anyway, so add that to the list. More info on the ad. A new AI-filled TV ad from Frontline Action, a Ted Cruz-aligned nonprofit, goes after James Fishback, Florida governor, Dan Bilzerian, in Florida 6. I can't believe that they put me in this goddamn ad, bro. That is, at least you can't tell from how bad this one is. Our Queen Claudia getting love in New York? Oh my God. There's no fucking way. Oh my God. Oh my God. Never been prouder to be Mexican in my life than this moment. Okay. Let me tell you something. Okay. God damn, I love being Flexican. Okay. Flexicanos rise up. That's me. I would be crying like that. If I could hug Claudia like this, I would be crying real tears too. Bro, you're wearing a Spain jersey? Yeah, because they defeated Argentina. What are you talking about? This is a tactical decision. I dream of the day where Claudia takes over California and California secedes and joins Mexico as it's supposed to, so that we can have fucking free healthcare and shit. You know what I mean? I dream of that day. We could greatly improve the Mexican economy too. It's win-win, baby. Win-win. We must cut our losses right now. We must return to tradition.
We love you, all right? All Mexicans, we love you, right? We love you.
Jake Lang and Abdul Drama may have been coordinated with liberal Metapod. What is that?